Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, a fatal shootout erupts in the capital of Comoros, hours after opposition presidential candidates say that they're planning on unseating the recently re-elected president, who they say fixed last weekend's polls. Also, Mozambique's worst humanitarian disaster. The country calls off rescue operations for victims of cyclone Idie as the number of cholera cases amongst stricken communities rises to 139. And periods can bring the lives of some women to a stop if they can't afford sanitary products. We head to Burkina Faso, where one group of women is trying to bring down the cost by making reusable and, dare I say it, pretty cool pads. But first, the US has ordered all its diplomatic staff out of the Comoros after at least 3 people were killed on Thursday. An exchange of gunfire broke out in the capital, Moroni. The violence came after opposition candidates accused the recently re-elected president of fraud and announced plans to unseat him. Nicolas Chemin has more.
4 days after President Assoumani's re-election, gunfire rocked the capital, Moroni. A clash between armed men and the security forces that left several people dead. A little earlier, one of the main opposition leaders, Swalihi Mohammed, was arrested. He had just given a press conference calling the president a dictator and announcing he was heading a transitional government.
The mission of the National Transition Council is to resolve the post-election crisis, ensure a peaceful transition, preserve peace, stability, and national cohesion in our country.
On Tuesday, Assoumani, who's already ruled the country for a total of 10 years, admitted there had been some problems on election day.
It's true that there were mistakes, but we consider ourselves happy because it could have been a lot more serious. So we congratulate ourselves. We thank God and the Comorian people. But as I said, it is the easiest part that has been done. Now comes a more difficult task. It is the construction of the country, and I need everyone behind me.
Local NGOs and international observers said there had been irregularities during the poll. For months now, the president's critics have been saying that he's becoming increasingly authoritarian. Dozens of opposition members have been arrested. Last year, following a referendum, the constitution was changed. An amendment that means Assoumani might now remain in power until 2029.
At least 15 people were killed in Mogadishu on Thursday when a car bomb exploded in the Somali capital. Extremist group Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the attack. Errol Maxwell has more.
It struck as people were having lunch on one of the Somalian capital's main thoroughfares. The blast from the bomb tossed parked cars into the air and ripped into this restaurant and other surrounding buildings, killing more than a dozen people. It's the latest in a recent string of blasts in Mogadishu, all claimed by Al-Qaeda-affiliated Al-Shabaab. Death and devastation has become a depressing but mundane reality for residents here.
It's shocking for me, especially as a mother. I'm asking those behind the explosions to stop this. Every day we cry over dead bodies. It's very hard to talk about.
Despite receiving military support from the US and a multinational African Union force, Mogadishu is still frequently hit by Al-Shabaab. The extremist group was chased out of the capital in 2011 and has since lost many of its strongholds. But its thousands of fighters are determined to establish an Islamic state and continue to wage a guerrilla war against the authorities.
Now, in the wake of Cyclone Idie, the number of cholera cases in Mozambique has risen to 139. The risk of an outbreak of disease is high as thousands of displaced people cram into shelters and struggle to find clean drinking water. A massive vaccination campaign is due to start next week. At least 468 people were killed in the devastating storm that hit southern Africa in mid-March. And rescue operations in Mozambique were called off on Thursday. France 24's Aisha Ishmael has just returned to South Africa from a week, reporting for us from the destroyed city of Beira in Mozambique. Aisha, glad that you made it home. First of all, just tell us a bit more about what your impressions of Beira were from the time that you spent there.
Good evening, Georgia. I have 2 words: destruction and devastation. So hundreds and thousands of people were affected and lost just about everything. In the streets of Beira, I saw trees uprooted, ripped out of the ground. Electricity poles stand bent with electricity wires lay strewn across the ground and some dangling in the water. And in areas like Buzi, water up until yesterday was still about 2.5 meters high. And as the water started receded, some villagers took the opportunity to flee the flooded areas on foot. And there were broken windows and roofs blown off of houses. So again, destruction and devastation are the two words to describe what I saw in areas in Beira.
And what did the aid workers and authorities that you spoke to say about what their plans for the next step in moving on from this disaster would be?
Well, some of the rescue and aid workers that I spoke to said that they were now preparing and dealing with what they called the next disaster, and that is an outbreak of cholera, malaria, and typhoid. You must remember there is almost no electricity in most of the areas in Beira, very little drinking water and stagnant water just about everywhere.
At least 468 people have officially been registered as having died in Mozambique because of the cyclone. Does that seem about right based on what people in Beira were saying when you were there?
Well, the villagers that I spoke to disputed this figure announced by the government. They saying that the dead in some of the villages had not been counted and included. And they saying that as soon as they find bodies, they bury them, bury people, they bury these bodies because they don't have the facilities to store the bodies. They don't have electricity, they don't have refrigeration, and the mortuaries have all been destroyed. And so they need to bury people as soon as they find them. And so they saying that the official figures are not the correct figures, and it's much higher than the government figures that were announced 2 days ago.
Thanks very much. Aisha Ismail there for us, who spent a week in Beira in Mozambique in the wake of the destruction caused by cyclone Idie. Now, Maltese special forces took back control of an oil tanker on Thursday, which had a day earlier been commandeered by migrants it had rescued at sea. The group of about 100 migrants, including women and dozens of minors, reportedly took control of the vessel because they were desperate not to be returned to Libya. They're now in Europe, and some have dubbed the incident piracy. However, humanitarian groups have said that the migrants are understandably terrified of Libyan detention camps and find themselves in an impossible situation.
Des Schiffes El Hiblo durch Geflüchtete handelt es sich nicht
The takeover of a ship by refugees is not piracy. Rather, it is an act of self-defense in a life or death situation.
Viele dieser Menschen sind aus Konzentrations
Many of these people have fled from concentration camp-like situations and tried to save their lives by crossing the sea. Then they are found and forced to return. It is not surprising that this leads acts of desperation, but foreseeable, and has a lot to do with how Europe is currently dealing with this issue of maritime rescue. We call for the end of repatriations to Libya and the recognition that they are in breach of international law, because that's what they are.
Dazu auf, Rückführungen nach Libyen zu unterbinden und als völkerrechtswidrig.
Now, Gambia's ex-president contributed to the country's debt by looting about $1 billion during his 22 years in power. Corruption reporting group, the OCCRP, accuses Yahya Jammeh of having looted several state accounts to fund his lavish lifestyle. Previous estimates for how much he allegedly stole were only about $90 million. Jammeh is currently in exile in Equatorial Guinea after having lost the 2016 election to current leader Adama Barrow. Now, about 1 in 10 African girls are reckoned to skip or drop out of school entirely because they struggle to deal with their periods. Millions can't afford sanitary towels. But in Burkina Faso, one group of women's come together to bring the costs down by making reusable pads. Our team reports.
At this Ouagadougou market stand, a new local product is making waves. reusable sanitary towels made in Burkina Faso. For 19-year-old Alida, the pad means savings, a one-time purchase that she'll be able to reuse every month, and it's practical too.
I prefer this because you can wear them, you can take them off, change them, wash them, and then dry them in the sun. It's better than the ones we buy at the pharmacy. It's clean, it's good, we're comfortable in it. It's African, it's made with colourful fabric. I'm going to buy a few and use them every time I have my period.
Behind the reusable pads is P3, a Burkinabe association that focuses on recycling. The association's president wanted to provide adequate solutions for women on their period, which remains a taboo subject.
We know that today women use anything they can. It can be fabric, cotton wool, or even cardboard or leaves in remote places in Africa. Our goal today is to provide access to a clean, economic, sustainable and hygienic solution for women during menstruation.
Plastic-based sanitary towels contain non-biodegradable materials. At the workshop, the women assembled the reusable pads by hand, knowing they should never make it to landfill.
I'm doing the finishing touches. For example, she puts the fabric down on the towel. Her name is Salimata. This is Awa. She also lays the fabric. This lady is cutting the fabric. Her name is also Awa.
A menstruation kit containing reusable and washable sanitary towels costs 15,000 CFA francs, around €23. The association hopes it's an affordable solution to help girls protect themselves during their period so they can stay active. According to UNICEF, in Africa, 1 in 10 girls avoids going to school when she's on her period.
That's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.